Welcome to the Andrew Tucker TV channel, where we render incisive and biting political commentaries. Political and social commentaries, I must say. Make sure that you're liking and you're sharing and subscribing to the channel. And in this afternoon's presentation, I am going to be looking at a rather controversial topic, Marcus Garvey, the Jamaican father of the U.S. civil rights movement. And I'm sure that many Americans are going to be saying, oh, is he really the father of the U.S. civil rights movement? Yes, he is. Before Martin Luther King Jr. dreamed of freedom, before Malcolm X demanded justice, there was a Jamaican man whose vision lit the spark for all of it. Marcus Garvey, the revolutionary from Jamaica, planted the seeds that grew into America's civil rights movement. His ideas of Black pride, self-reliance, and Pan-African unity shaped Malcolm X, inspired Martin Luther King Jr., and influenced the Nation of Islam. So the real question is, without Marcus Garvey, would the civil rights movement in the US have existed in the way we know it today? Now, when we talk about Black pride, that was the philosophy that encompassed the civil rights movement. Black people, for the first time, believed in themselves. Remember now that we're talking about a Black American society in which you had Jim Crow laws, which suggested that Blacks were inferior and therefore they should, be separate and they should have separate spaces and not be integrated into the mainstream culture. Of course, you had a few exceptions who were allowed, depending on their status. But the fact of the matter, for the most part, most African Americans were denied equal rights before the law. And that is what you have to understand. Now, Marcus Garvey, when he went to the United States, remember now he went there to see Booker T. Washington. And those of you who said to me that Booker T. Washington was the one who was Marcus Garvey's mentor. Now, well, he might have been one of Marcus Garvey's mentors in the sense that Marcus Garvey applauded his vision for self-reliance in terms of vocational training for Blacks and to own Black businesses. I think that he did. And nothing is wrong to have more than one mentors. But in terms of having a more far-reaching impact, in terms of his intellect, in terms of his visionary understanding of where Black people should be, I think that Marcus Garvey stood way ahead, light years of Booker T. Washington. Now, we credit Booker T. Washington for in his time, he did have an inordinate influence on Black culture, right? In his time, in his era. Now, when Marcus Garvey went to the United States, he was flabbergasted at what he saw. I don't think he understood the profundity of the racial tensions that was in the United States. So he was just there to see Booker T. Washington, to learn some of the things that he was doing, and then perhaps he would have returned to Jamaica or somewhere else. But he left Jamaica, so obviously he might have planned to have returned to Jamaica. But when he went to the United States and he saw the plight, the depressing conditions surrounding Black people, particularly in the South, he knew that his work was carved out for him in the United States to lead a people who needed a sense of self, who needed to have felt that they were somebody. They were somebody's children, and that is what Marcus Garvey imbibed in African Americans at that time. Now, we must understand that Marcus Garvey was coming from a colonial Jamaica, a society which was predominantly Black, with the masses of people being of African descent. So even though Jamaica had remnants of racial tensions there in that colonial Jamaica, but it was not to the extent, as you'd see in the United States, where you have the large majority of them being of European descent. right? And the laws were stacked against them. The fact of the matter is, so Marcus Garvey had a more understanding, a better understanding, a better grip on who he was as a person. Not only that, he was also a printer in Jamaica and was around books. So he had read voraciously and understood what Blackness was all about. So he says that Black people should wear their black skins with a badge of honor. Now, before that, there was Black pride in America before Marcus Garvey. But let me make it clear here. Marcus Garvey, if there was any Black pride, it was always silent, right? It was silent. It remained in Black or among Black circles, right? But with Marcus Garvey mainstreamed that Black culture and said that this is who we are, and we're proud of who we are. We are proud of our African ancestry. We're proud of our ancestors who have laid the groundwork and who were resilient and who stood up and fought against the system, the mighty system of slavery that existed. Okay, so this is what I want to say. And there was a very interesting article by Maluf Molefe. I think he is, I'm not sure if he's retired now, former professor at Temple University. And we have here from Jamaica's Marcus Garvey came an African vision of freedom. Molefe Katie Assad, professor and chair of the Africology and African American Studies Department at Temple University in Philadelphia, describes Marcus Garvey as probably the most, and I quote, the most significant African political genius that has ever lived. And I credit him for being arguably the most astute and the most prominent African or man of African descent of the 20th century, the most intellectual of the 20th century. What a man he was. And we have not yet studied the profundity, the length and the breadth and the depth of his knowledge and of his vision. And for that reason, we find ourselves, Black people of African descent, find themselves in the position that we have found ourselves in, because we have not tapped in to his vision. And no wonder the FBI sought to have buried his works through telling us that, or alleging that he was a fraudster. Right? That was something that was a psychological warfare on the minds of people of African descent. Now, this is what Molefe continues to say. He infused the idea of Black self-reliance or Black self-sufficiency in all of the societies and communities in the Black world. The idea of you can organize and create institutions that fight for your own liberation, Asante says. He says Garvey is also responsible for symbols such as the red, green, and black Pan-African flag. Okay, so these are the things that he is known for. Experts say Garvey's philosophies of Black nationalism and Pan-Africanism, movements that called for Black people of African descent to unify and establish an independent nation in Africa, helped pave the way for the civil rights movement. And I would say the second iteration of the civil rights movement in the United States. Garvey's quest for Black self-reliance, they say, would be left for generations. And this is what is happening. He transcended his time. And this is the difference between Booker T. Washington and Marcus Garvey. Now, Booker T. Washington was called for his time, but Marcus Garvey transcended his time. His vision is a transcendental vision, one that will last for eternity. Okay? So this is the genius, this is the metal of the man that came out of Jamaica, that Jamaicans rejected, that Jamaicans themselves rejected and still continue to reject in the form of his philosophies. Okay? And let me just put it out there, Jamaicans like the what do you call it, or the bandwagon. They like to jump on the bandwagon and say, yes, we have produced Marcus Garvey. But many of us and the Jamaicans who lived in his era never stood up for him. Many of them didn't. They believed what the colonial masters said. and they would have rather voted for the candidates that the colonial masters choose, which were at the time Bustamante and Norman Washington Manley, to have led us. And they didn't have the vision. And we continue to do the same thing at our peril. Okay? Because that's who we are. We like to jump on the wagon, the bandwagon, but we don't enjoy the process to achieving success. But when people achieve the success after they've achieved it, then we say, yes, we begin to claim that person. Marcus Garvey, but were he alive now and was actively involved in our society, would we have seen him as in the way in which we see him now? Maybe not. Okay, so he infused the idea of Black self-sufficiency in all of our societies. Garvey, who was born in Jamaica in 1887, believed that white society would never treat Black people equally. And he's right. Isn't that visionary? He saw from his time that white societies would never treat Black people equally. He said it. So when we're talking about integration, Marcus Garvey would not necessarily have been in agreement with integration, which we are now lamenting the fact that perhaps we should not have integrated into the mainstream, the so-called mainstream American society. Because while some have profited and benefited, I would say a large majority perhaps haven't. Okay? We like to celebrate the minority, but we don't all often talk about the majority who have been left behind. And the same thing happens in Jamaica too. The Black majority have been left behind, but we celebrate the Black minority who have made it. This is how we think. And we say, look at that person, look at X, look at Y, look at Z. But we do not look as a collective. How much have we achieved as a collective? Very little. And that is why when you go to Jamaica and you look at the whole society, you realize that it is poverty-stricken amidst the prosperity that they claim is happening, but it's prosperity for the minority. But they don't like to think about that. And had Marcus Garvey lived long enough, well, he wouldn't be able to live long enough because nobody lives beyond, maybe over 115 years. I mean, we have a few people who have lived at that time, but, he wouldn't be alive today. But let us say he was. Let us say that Marcus Garvey had the opportunity to be living in our society and looking at modern day Jamaica. Would he have been pleased? I don't think he would have. I do not think he would have been pleased. Now, so we see that he formed a number of organizations. He founded the Anti-Colonial Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League in Jamaica in 1914. The organization is commonly known by the abbreviation UNIA. Okay, so the association created a societal model of Black nationalism and Pan-Africanism through political, economic, and social means, said Robert Hill, a research professor of history at UCLA and a Garvey expert. The UNIA also established the Universal African Legion, a paramilitary group, as well as the Black Cross Nurses, a group modeled after the Red Cross that provided health care to Black communities. Garvey also established the Black Star Line steamship company, which transported passengers and goods to Africa. Now, this is what the mettle of the man was, the genius that, encompassed and characterized his life. But we tend as a people not to look at intellectuals. We tend to look more at entertainers because that's what the white people have conditioned us to do, right? To pay more attention to entertainers, to sports, to athletes, to the music people, musicians. And while these people are important, but they should not be placed at the center of our existence. Entertainment should not be the hallmark of who we are. Are you saying both as popular and great a feat that he accomplished on the world stage in terms of his Olympics performance and achievements should not be the hallmark of who Jamaica is, right? We need more than that. We need to have intellectuals who we actually showcase to the world. We need to have economic development. That should be a model for the world. But instead, we just like to have the school culture where we continue, as we did on the plantation, as we did on the slave plantations, to entertain the white man. That's all we're good for. And Marcus Garvey would have been sorely displeased at what we've accomplished so far. There are little gains here and there that he could say, that's good. Nothing is bad in its entirety. However, when he looks at the big picture, if he should have taken a look at the big picture, he would have been sorely displeased, not only with Jamaica, but also with what he's seeing in the US today and the state of Black people in the US today. He would have been sorely displeased because we like the superficial. We like to see the symbolisms and the Beyoncés and the Barack Hussein Obamas. And these are all symbols of Black excellence, but they are not the rule. They are the exception to the rule. And they are the ones who have been chosen, selected based on their competences, and sometimes just based on the fact that they were saleable. There are others who might even be more competent, but who were not selected because they would have challenged the status quo. And that is what was the hallmark of Marcus Garvey's life, that he continued. He was a feisty person, one who challenged the status quo, one who had an intellect so big, so large, so humongous that he would challenge. He had a critical thinking mind and was not going to be narrowed into a box, as he liked to say, oh, the Jamaican. Who is a Jamaican? Right? A nationality is not going to put you into a box and have you behave as all Black or Jamaican people or whatever people you think you are talking about. Right? People are born with brains. And the brain that we have is something that is going to take us centuries, if not eternity, to unpack in terms of what it can do. We're not even using a third of the brain's capacity, right? We're not using even 1/3 of the brain's capacity. So imagine if we were to use all of it. If we are not using that and we have produced some great physicists and some geniuses around the world, can you imagine? And they too have not used up 1/3 of their cognitive capacities. Can you imagine what this brain can accomplish? And based on what I have read, and I have done a lot of reading on Marcus Garvey, okay? And based on my research, based on my investigation of this larger-than-life person, I believe that Marcus Garvey believed that there was nothing that he could not have achieved. Now, Martin Luther King Jr. went to Jamaica in 1963 to make pronounce a speech at the University of the West Indies, and he paid tribute to Marcus Garvey. Now, he mentioned that he inspired him, and he acknowledged that had there not been a Marcus Garvey, there wouldn't have been a Malcolm X and other people, other noteworthy people. We must understand, Marcus, that Malcolm X's mother was a Garveyite from Grenada. She had West Indian heritage, for those of you who do not know, right? And Professor Hill, I would say that he is the Marcus Garvey expert from UCLA, from the University of California, who is now retired. I did invite him on the program. He was able to make it to speak much, to elucidate on Marcus Garvey's career. But I have read a couple, watched a number of his documentaries that I found to have been very, very informative. And for those of you who would like, go on YouTube or other things and purchase some of his books on Marcus Mosiah Garvey. That is Robert Hill, Professor Robert Hill. I think he's now retired, lives in Jamaica, I think. Okay, but for years he taught at the University of California, and he spoke about Marcus Garvey, the all-encompassing character, and in which he suggested that Marcus Mosiah Garvey was a military man, and that's how he dressed sometimes, you know, dressing as Marcus Garvey, the captain, the sergeant, right? Marcus Garvey, the philosopher, the one who crafted his philosophies in the book that we call The Opinions and Philosophies of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Marcus Garvey, the educator, the one who has educated many people, particularly Black people, about their heritage and the need to be stimulated, the need to be proud of who we are as a people and the legacies that we have left on the world stage. Okay, Marcus Garvey, the politician. And what a leader he was. He is the only Black person, maybe we can say the only man in among races, not only among Black people, but among all of the races, among all ethnicities, who have ever sparked a mass movement that encompassed all societies, including all the way to Africa and Asia. Marcus Mosiah Garvey did that in an age where we didn't have the internet and we didn't have social media. So we can say that Marcus Garvey, even though there was no physical technology, but he was literally the face of social media, correct? That whatever we say now, people can hear us. Even the video can reach as far as Africa. But then Marcus Garvey was doing it. It took some time for it to have gotten there, obviously, but he got there. And he was known by people in near and far lands. This is the impact that a man coming out of Jamaica, out of rural Jamaica, out of St. Anne, had on the world. A man that Jamaica only talks about when it's his birthday and no one, you know, remembers Marcus Garvey. Okay? But Marcus Garvey and his Jamaican identity, because the rough and the roughness of the Jamaican culture sometimes, the grit and the determination to achieve, Jamaica gave him that. And he used it not in a negative way, but he used it in a positive way to have stimulated and to have carved out a solid path on which Black people and peoples around the world can walk, and they can look and say, what a man. And the country, Jamaica, that gave birth to such a prominent and illustrious person in the lives of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Without a Marcus Mosiah Garvey, perhaps you would not have had the second iteration of the U.S. Civil Rights Movement, something that Jamaicans need to be proud of. We should, unlike any other person, apart from African Americans, be aware of these things. We should have a deep understanding of the civil rights movement and the role that West Indians played, Jamaicans specifically in that movement. Because remember now that Robert Hill, well, you might not remember because I'm not sure you know Robert Hill. Many of you perhaps don't know Professor Robert Hill. But he did say in his research, and he had to do some sort of revision to what the scholars had done in the US and beyond before, he suggested that when he delved into the Garvey movement and what it entailed, that it didn't start out as a predominantly African-American group, as many of us had. It was a West Indian group coming from different parts of the West Indies. The Barbadians, the Panamanians, okay? And people were saying, oh, the Panamanians, yeah, lots of Jamaicans are living in Panama, the Panamanian Jamaican descent, Jamaica contact, our connection, the Panamanian Jamaican connection goes back to the 19th century, for those of you who do not know. And we need to talk about that on this platform one of these days. The Costa Rican Jamaican connection also in Limon, because Marcus Garvey also lived there and worked there on the banana plantation in Limon. Yes, we need to talk about these things and to speak more about the global impact of the likes of Marcus Garvey. It's time now that we look at the positive influence, the intellectual influence of the Jamaican culture. We spread it too much as this cool culture, this dancehall, Beanie Man, Chabarangs culture. And everybody thinks that Jamaicans are just dancehall singers who are there cursing cloths every day. That is how we are sold, and we have sold ourselves to the world. To the world. And that is not going to merit the respect that we want from the world, because no cool culture is going to be respected. It will gain some amount of traction because people like to be entertained. But after the entertainment is finished, the respect stops there. Hope you understand that. So those of you who think that Marcus Garvey impacted and had an inordinate influence on the second iteration of the US civil rights movement, please let me hear your comment in the comment section. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and make sure that you're responding to the videos. You are liking it, and you are also watching it, not watching some parts of it, but watching it throughout. Thank you so much, and see you in another one. Adios.